A luxury boutique manager thought she could humiliate Sandra Bullock for looking too casual, never realizing who she was dealing with. But when Keanu Reeves walked in, he did something that left everyone speechless. And you won't believe how this story ends. What happened next turned into a scandal no one saw coming. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The boutique Eloise Paris was more than just a store. It was a temple for the ultra-rich, a space where ordinary people were not welcome. Its discreet facade concealed a lavish interior, furnished with genuine leather seating, imported rugs, and shelves displaying exclusive pieces from renowned designer brands. Inside, everything exuded exclusivity, from the woody fragrance lingering in the air to the champagne served only to the right customers. The soft instrumental jazz playing in the background seemed to whisper, "If you have to ask the price, this place isn't for you." And who ensured these invisible rules were upheld? Eleanor, the boutique manager. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade. Nothing escaped her radar. If someone unworthy entered the store, she would spot them in seconds. Her black tailored dress, designer high heels, and impeccable posture weren't just fashion choices, they were armor. She wasn't selling clothes, she was selling status, and she would protect the boutique's reputation at any cost. The soft chime of the doorbell rang as a woman stepped into the boutique. Anywhere else she would have gone unnoticed. She wore a simple white hoodie, plain sweatpants, and a black cap that partially concealed her face. Her brown hair was tied in a casual bun, and her sunglasses shielded her eyes, making it difficult for anyone to recognize who she really was. But in this boutique, where luxury and extravagance were the only accepted languages, she immediately stood out, and not in a good way. Eleanor, who had been adjusting a diamond necklace on one of the VIP clients, froze for a second, her gaze locking on to the new arrival. She didn't even need to think. A tourist. One of those women who wandered in to look around, perhaps sneak a few photos, and ultimately leave without buying anything. And that would not be allowed in her store. Discreetly, Eleanor stepped forward and walked toward the entrance. Clara, watching closely, already knew what was about to happen, and the audience who knew the truth could feel the injustice unfolding. Sandra scanned the shelves and displays at a leisurely pace. Her fingers brushed against the delicate fabrics of the exclusive pieces. She loved fashion. She always had. But she despised the game of superiority some people played around it. "Can I help you?" Eleanor's voice came from behind her, polite but carrying an underlying coldness. Sandra turned to face the tall, flawless woman before her. "Oh, thank you. I'm just looking." Eleanor maintained her smile, but her decision had already been made. "I see. Just so you know, we carry only exclusive, made-to-measure pieces. Nothing here is placed on display by chance." The slightly condescending tone carried a clear message. This place is not for you. Sandra pressed her lips together slightly. "I imagine it's not." Eleanor tilted her head slightly, caught off guard by the response. Maybe she got the hint and will leave now, she thought. But no, Sandra remained. Then, as if testing the manager's limits, she reached for a dress on the rack, a highly exclusive piece from the new collection with a price tag only a select few could afford, and examined it carefully. That was enough to make Eleanor lose patience. She swiftly turned and gestured discreetly to Clara, who was still standing by the counter. Clara hesitated. "Clara, keep an eye on that woman." "But why?" Eleanor sighed as if the explanation should be obvious. "Clara, she might ruin the experience for our real customers." Clara didn't reply, but something inside her twisted with discomfort. The wrong customer was being judged, and she had no idea what was coming next. Sandra continued browsing the store unhurriedly, but now the stares directed at her intensified. Two VIP clients whispered discreetly on one of the sofas. "Did you see that woman? How did she get in here? A hoodie and a cap. She looks like a lost tourist." The murmurs weren't loud enough for Sandra to hear, but she felt them. It was always the same game. But Sandra didn't like to react immediately. She waited, observed. Eleanor, on the other hand, needed to end this now. She didn't want her exclusive clients feeling uncomfortable with the presence of a woman who clearly didn't belong here. So she decided to be more direct. She walked over with firm steps and stopped beside Sandra. "Ma'am," she said with a perfectly trained smile, "I noticed you like that dress." Sandra turned to her, unfazed. "Yes, it's beautiful. I agree, but perhaps I could suggest something that better suits your style." Sandra slightly raised her eyebrows. "My style?" Eleanor's smile remained, but her posture stiffened. "Yes, we have some more casual pieces, something that might make you feel more comfortable." Clara, watching from afar, felt her heart race. She had seen Eleanor do this before, but this time something was different. Sandra gave a small, knowing smile. "You think I wouldn't be comfortable in this?" Eleanor blinked, surprised for the second time that day. Something in this woman's gaze set off a small alarm inside her. "I just meant that." "You think I can't afford it?" The question was posed calmly, controlled, but the impact was devastating. Some attendants looked away, pretending to rearrange the shelves. The VIP clients stopped talking, now listening in absolute silence. Clara held her breath. Eleanor, however, would not be intimidated, not at all. "Ma'am, I was simply suggesting something more appropriate." Sandra studied her for a moment, and then she did something no one expected. She laughed, softly, controlled, but she laughed. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "I see. Thanks for the suggestion." Sandra continued exploring the boutique, and then, as if to test Eleanor's patience, she picked up a black silk dress, an elegant piece with an exorbitant price tag. Eleanor's eyes locked onto her immediately. She took a slow breath before walking towards Sandra, keeping her steps controlled. She stopped right beside her, looking her up and down as if examining something unpleasant. And then Eleanor smiled, but it was a fake, venomous, condescending smile. "Are you sure you want to try on that dress?" Sandra raised her eyebrows but didn't respond immediately. Eleanor then continued, not giving her a chance to process the question. "I just mean that this particular design requires a certain posture, a grace that brings out its natural elegance, and of course, the right accessories." Her gaze lingered discreetly on Sandra's baggy sweatshirt, then on the black cap covering part of her face, and finally Eleanor let out a quiet, amused chuckle. "I could suggest something more appropriate for your profile." The attack was direct. Sandra caught it immediately, and then she smiled slightly, because now she was sure that Eleanor had no idea who she was. But still, she wanted to see how far this manager would go. Sandra held the dress for a second, then she turned to Eleanor. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" Eleanor's smile didn't waver, but her eyes gleamed with a hint of superiority. "Just that this kind of piece was designed for women who know how to wear it." Sandra frowned. "Women who know how to wear it?" Eleanor held her gaze firmly. "Yes, women who understand the sophistication of haute couture, who recognize the cuts, the fabrics." She made a vague gesture with her hand. "Who don't need help understanding the value of a dress like this." Sandra took a deep breath. She was used to being treated like a Hollywood star, but today, in this place, she was being treated like nothing, and that said everything about Eleanor. So, without looking away, she asked, "You think I don't understand?" Eleanor's smile grew a little wider. "I think some people mistake this boutique for just any store." Sandra let out a small, amused laugh. Eleanor's disdain couldn't be more obvious. "So, in your opinion, I shouldn't be here?" she asked, feigning curiosity. Eleanor played innocent. "Oh, I would never say that, but—" She smiled again, tilting her head slightly. "Some of our clients might feel uncomfortable." Now the attack was direct. Eleanor was making it clear you shouldn't be here, and you're making people uncomfortable. Sandra pressed her lips together for a moment, and then she let out a slow sigh. I see. Eleanor thought she had won. She thought Sandra would leave, humiliated. But then something unexpected happened. Sandra looked Eleanor straight in the eye, and with an eerily calm voice, she said the one thing that made the entire boutique freeze. Funny, because when I walked in, no one offered me champagne. The silence in the boutique was deafening. The assistants exchanged glances. The VIP clients stopped talking. Everyone knew that important clients were welcomed with a glass of champagne, but Sandra Bullock got nothing. Eleanor's face went pale for a brief moment, but she quickly tried to recover. Oh, that must have been a mistake. Of course, I can have a glass brought to you right away. Sandra smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. No need. Her voice was soft but sharp, like a blade. I've already seen everything I needed to see. Then, before Eleanor could respond, Sandra turned to Clara, the young assistant who had been silent this entire time. Do you think this dress would look good on me? Clara hesitated. Her gaze moved from Sandra to Eleanor, and then she took a deep breath and answered, Yes, it would look incredible. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, and at that moment she realized something terrible. She was no longer in control. Eleanor still believed she was in control, but she was about to lose everything. Eleanor couldn't believe it. That woman in her white sweatshirt and black cap refused to leave, and worse, she was starting to turn the game around. First the audacity to question her, then that sharp comment about the champagne. And finally, Clara, her own assistant, had the nerve to contradict her in front of everyone. Control was slipping through her fingers, and Eleanor couldn't stand losing. So she did what she did best. She attacked. Eleanor took a step forward and forced a cold, calculated smile. Well, since you're so interested in that dress, I can call one of our sales assistants to help you in the fitting room. There was an unmistakable tone of disdain in her voice, as if she were saying, if you insist on embarrassing yourself, I'll make sure to watch you do it. Sandra immediately caught on, but before she could respond, Eleanor turned to Clara instead. Clara, please take this piece to the fitting room and see if we have an appropriate size. Sandra raised an eyebrow. She knew exactly what that phrase meant. Eleanor was subtly suggesting that Sandra didn't have the right body type for the dress, that she wasn't refined enough, that she wasn't from this world. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. There was a tense silence in the boutique. Some VIP clients smirked discreetly, not because they actually found it funny, but because this humiliation scene was getting too good to look away from. Sandra took a deep breath and crossed her arms. She was still holding the dress, and she looked around. Now the stares weren't just on her, they were also on Eleanor. Some clients seemed to enjoy the spectacle. Others, however, looked uncomfortable. They knew that if this woman was being treated like this, the same could happen to any of them. Eleanor realized this, but her arrogance wouldn't let her stop. She doubled down. You know, ma'am, she began in a falsely casual tone, we have a more affordable store 3 blocks from here. Perhaps it would be easier to find something that suits your style better. The blow was brutal. Even Clara held her breath. Sandra let out a low, disbelieving laugh. Did you just suggest I go to a cheaper store? Eleanor didn't back down. I just think some clients prefer something more practical and comfortable. She smiled, and then delivered the final line that sealed her fate. After all, luxury isn't for everyone. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the VIP clients didn't know how to react. The sales assistants looked away, nervous. Clara felt her stomach drop. Sandra kept smiling, but this time it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a dangerous smile. Then she did something unexpected. She took the dress and draped it over her arm and started walking toward the register. Eleanor frowned. What are you doing? Sandra stopped right in front of the counter. She looked at the cash register, then she looked straight at Eleanor. "I'll take it." The entire boutique held its breath. Eleanor let out a scoffing laugh. "Really?" Sandra nodded. "Yes. After all, luxury may not be for everyone." She took off her sunglasses, "but I'm pretty sure it's for me." Eleanor turned pale, because at that moment she realized. One of the VIP clients gasped. Another whispered, shocked, "Oh my God." Because without the sunglasses, now everyone recognized her. Sandra Bullock, the Hollywood star, one of the most powerful women in the film industry, a woman with a fortune of over $250 million. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The color drained from her face, and in that instant, horror filled her body. She had just publicly humiliated one of the most famous actresses in the world, and now everyone in the boutique knew it. And then the boutique doors opened again. What happened next was something no one would ever forget. Eleanor was frozen, her eyes locked onto Sandra Bullock. The shock hadn't fully registered yet. She had just humiliated one of the most famous women in the world, and now everyone in the boutique knew it. The VIP clients were speechless. The sales assistants didn't dare move. Clara held her breath, sensing that something even bigger was about to happen. And then the boutique doors opened again. The soft chime echoed, but this time the sound felt different. And when he walked in, the boutique collectively stopped breathing. He walked into the store with slow but firm steps. Keanu Reeves. His long black coat swayed slightly as he moved. His slightly messy hair gave him an effortless look, but his eyes weren't surprised, because he already knew exactly what had happened here, and he knew who he was looking for. Without hesitation, he crossed the boutique without glancing at anyone else. Eleanor felt her body tense. The VIP clients covered their mouths, stunned. Clara swallowed hard. And then Keanu stopped right in front of Sandra, and without saying a word, he hugged her. A hug, strong, real, the embrace of a long-awaited reunion. Sandra hugged him back, a soft smile forming on her lips. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. No one could process what was happening, because it wasn't just Sandra Bullock now. It was also Keanu Reeves, and he had just embraced her like an old friend. "It's been too long, Bullock," he murmured, pulling back slightly to look at her. Sandra smiled. "Far too long, Keanu." And then he looked around. He took in the boutique, and finally his eyes met Eleanor's. She felt her body freeze, because at that moment Keanu Reeves knew exactly what had happened here. He didn't need to ask. He had seen Sandra's expression. He had seen the tension in the sales assistants' faces. He had noticed Clara's nervous stare. And then he spoke. Keanu turned back to Sandra, and in a tone calm but dripping with irony, he said, "I hope they treated you well." The impact was instant. The VIP clients glanced at Eleanor. Clara bit her lower lip, tense. The sales assistants held their breath because everyone knew the answer. Everyone knew that Sandra Bullock had been humiliated, and now Keanu Reeves knew it too. Eleanor tried to open her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her entire body felt paralyzed, because it didn't matter what she said now. The damage was already done. Sandra let out a slow, quiet laugh. She looked Eleanor straight in the eyes, and then she calmly said, "Oh yes, they were. Unforgettable." The words were like a knife through Eleanor's skin, because they weren't said in anger. They were spoken with absolute certainty. Eleanor felt her face burn. She wanted to say something, she needed to say something, but there were no more excuses, no way out. And then the worst thing possible happened. One of the VIP clients, an impeccably dressed blonde woman, turned to one of the sales assistants and murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "If they treat Sandra Bullock like this, imagine how they treat the rest of us." The boutique felt the impact of those words, and at that moment, Eleanor understood. Her career, her reputation, the status she had spent years building, was about to crumble. And then Eleanor's phone vibrated. What happened next was something she never could have predicted. Eleanor, feeling the weight of every eye on her, finally reacted. She took a deep breath, forcing a polite smile. "Miss Bullock," she cleared her throat, her voice unsteady, "I had no idea who you were." Sandra crossed her arms. "And that should justify something." Eleanor opened her mouth but found no answer, because for the first time she realized how ridiculous she sounded. "No, Eleanor tried to recover. "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding." Keanu raised an eyebrow slightly. "A misunderstanding?" The boutique seemed to hold its breath. His tone was low but carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Eleanor swallowed hard. She took a deep breath, desperately trying to regain control. "I just wanted to ensure our experience was selective." Sandra let out a quiet laugh. "Oh, so now you get to decide who deserves respect?" Eleanor felt her breath hitch. She knew she had lost, but she still hadn't seen the worst. Keanu watched, not interrupting, but his expression was clear. Justice had been served. The sales assistants no longer looked at Eleanor with respect. The VIP clients no longer admired her. The boutique, once her kingdom, now felt like a cage. Her phone vibrated again. She knew that on the other end of the line, the boutique owner had already seen the videos. Her career was in ruins. And then, with no more strength to fight, Eleanor simply lowered her head, because there was nothing left she could do. And then Eleanor received the message that would seal her fate once and for all. Eleanor held her phone with trembling hands. On the screen, a notification. It was from the boutique owner. "Eleanor, we have a serious problem. I need to speak with you immediately." Her heart pounded, but before she could react, something else happened. One of the VIP clients suddenly stood up, grabbed her designer handbag and said loudly, "I don't shop at places that mistreat their customers. I'm leaving." And she walked out without looking back. Eleanor swallowed hard. She realized that she wasn't just losing Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves' respect. She was losing everyone's. And then another client stood up. "If this happened to her, it could happen to any of us." The murmurs started. The sales assistants exchanged glances. The boutique, which had once been her kingdom, now felt like a courtroom. Eleanor was alone. And then Clara delivered the final blow. She took a deep breath and, without looking directly at Eleanor, removed her boutique name tag and placed it on the counter. "I can't work here anymore." The shock on Eleanor's face was immediate. "Clara?" Her voice came out low, almost pleading. But the young assistant didn't even hesitate. She turned to Sandra and Keanu and did something no one expected. "May I walk you both to the exit?" Sandra smiled. "Of course." And then the boutique doors opened once again, and the manager, who once prided herself on deciding who belonged and who didn't, now stood in silence as everyone walked out, leaving her behind. But the worst was yet to come, and Eleanor wasn't prepared for what would happen next. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves were sitting at a quiet cafe. Clara, now the former boutique assistant, was with them. She still looked a bit overwhelmed by it all. Sandra took a sip of her coffee and looked at the young woman. "So, Clara, what's next for you?" "You, Clara?" Clara shrugged, a bit shy. "I don't know. Maybe I'll look for something new, somewhere I can actually learn and grow." Keanu smiled. "Well, turns out I know a few people who could help with that." Clara widened her eyes. "Really?" Sandra smiled. "We like helping the ones who deserve it." And then Sandra's phone vibrated, a message from a friend. She opened it and read it aloud. "The boutique manager has been officially fired. The video now has 20 million views." Sandra looked at Keanu, and they exchanged a knowing look. And then she said the final words that would close this story forever. "Some people think luxury is power, but real power is knowing how to treat people with respect." Keanu nodded. Clara smiled. And across the city, in a silent apartment, Eleanor was learning that lesson the hard way. Status wasn't eternal. The judgment of the world was swift and unforgiving. And above all, Luxury was nothing without dignity. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.